The chandeliers shatter the silence before anyone speaks. Kael Varelli doesn't need to announce himself. The wheelchair does it for him. Every head turns, every whisper stops. At the center of the banquet hall stands Alara Voss in white silk and diamonds, her smile carved from ice. She doesn't flinch when he approaches. She waits. Then she destroys him with 7 words. I refuse to marry a broken man. The room doesn't gasp. It holds its breath. Empires don't collapse with noise. They fracture in silence. Kael says nothing, but something behind his eyes begins to wake, and it doesn't forgive. If you want to see how far a king can fall and how much further he can rise, stay until the end. Drop a like and comment the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Ish. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the murmurs began, soft, vicious, spreading like poison through champagne glasses and designer gowns. Kael Varelli sat in his wheelchair at the entrance of the Mariston Grand Hall, hands resting on the armrests, spine straight despite the burning shame crawling up his throat. He didn't look at the faces. He didn't need to. He could feel their pity like oil on his skin. Alara stood 20 feet away on the marble steps leading to the ceremonial altar, flanked by her parents and a small army of perfectly coiffed relatives. Her wedding dress was custom Parisian couture, every stitch worth more than some people earned in a year. She looked untouchable, radiant, and completely calm as she looked down at him. Say it again, Kael said quietly. His voice didn't shake. It should have. 6 months ago, he'd commanded rooms with a glance. Now he commanded nothing, not even the woman who'd promised to stand beside him. Alara tilted her head, as if considering whether he deserved the repetition. I refuse to marry a broken man, Kael. I thought I made that clear. Her voice carried. It was meant to. Every word landed like glass on stone, sharp and final. The guests shifted, uncomfortable but riveted. No one left. This was theater, and they had front-row seats to the execution of a king. Kael's jaw tightened. His hands didn't move. We had an agreement. We did. Alara descended 1 step, then another, her heels clicking softly. But agreements require both parties to hold up their end. You were supposed to be the head of the Varelli family, the man who controlled half the industrial supply chains in this city, the one everyone feared. She stopped 3 steps above him, close enough that he could see the cold calculation in her eyes. Now look at you. She didn't say the rest. She didn't need to. Kael had been untouchable once. 18 months ago, his name alone could shift markets, crush competitors, and silence rivals. The Varelli Empire wasn't just wealth. It was infrastructure, logistics, import-export channels that fed entire industries, legal on paper, lethal beneath it. And Kael had inherited it all at 28 when his father's heart gave out during a deal gone wrong. Then came the accident, a car crash on a coastal highway. No witnesses, no clear cause, just twisted metal, shattered vertebrae, and a man who woke up in a hospital bed unable to feel his legs. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. Kael didn't feel lucky. He felt like a target that someone had failed to finish off. The empire hadn't collapsed immediately, but it had started to fracture. Investors grew nervous, partners delayed contracts, rivals tested boundaries. And Alara, beautiful, ambitious Alara Voss, daughter of the Voss media conglomerate, had stayed by his side through 6 months of rehabilitation with the patience of someone waiting for a stock to recover. It hadn't recovered. And now, in front of 300 of the city's most powerful people, she was cutting her losses. You're making a mistake, Kael said. Alara's smile didn't reach her eyes. No, I'm correcting one. She turned, her dress sweeping across the marble like a curtain closing on a performance. Her father, Gregory Voss, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. He didn't look at Kael. None of them did. They simply walked toward the side exit, a coordinated retreat that left Kael alone at the center of the hall. The murmurs grew louder. Kael didn't move. His mind was a cold, methodical machine cataloging everything. The faces watching him, the angles of their stares, the ones who looked away too quickly, the ones who didn't look away at all. He counted 7 board members in the crowd, 3 district politicians, a dozen corporate executives who'd built their fortunes on Varelli contracts. All of them were calculating the same thing. What happens now? Someone coughed. A woman near the back whispered something to her husband, and they both turned toward the exit. Within seconds, others followed. The hall began to empty, not in a rush, but in a slow, deliberate drain, like watching blood leave a body. Cale waited until the room was nearly empty before he turned his wheelchair toward the door. His driver, Marcus, was waiting in the corridor, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with the kind of face that had seen too much and said too little. He didn't ask questions. He just pushed the wheelchair toward the exit, his footsteps steady and unbothered. They passed a woman on the way out. She was standing near one of the marble columns, arms crossed, watching the last guest trickle away. Dark skin, sharp cheekbones, hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but practical, the kind of thing someone wore when they had to work an event, not enjoy it. Kael's eyes caught hers for half a second. She didn't look away. She didn't offer pity either, just a level, assessing stare, like she was watching something unfold that she'd expected all along. Then Marcus turned the corner, and she was gone. The car ride back to the Varelli estate was silent. Marcus knew better than to fill the quiet with useless comfort. Cale stared out the window as the city blurred past. Glass towers, old brick warehouses, the harbor glinting in the distance. This place had been his kingdom once. Now it felt like a carcass being picked apart by scavengers. The estate sat on 12 acres outside the city center, surrounded by iron gates and a security team that had been with the family for 2 generations. The main house was a sprawling Gothic structure built by Kael's grandfather during the industrial boom, a monument to power that no longer felt as solid as it used to. Inside, the staff moved quietly. They'd heard the news. Everyone had. Kael's assistant, Davina, was waiting in the study. She was 43, efficient, and ruthless in the way that made her indispensable. She closed the door behind Marcus and stood in front of Kael's desk with a tablet in hand. 5 board members have requested emergency meetings, she said without preamble. 2 want to discuss leadership restructuring. 3 want to know if you're stepping down. Kael wheeled himself behind the desk and stared at the dark wood surface. I'm not stepping down. They're not asking politely. I don't care. Davina set the tablet on the desk. Kael, without the Voss Alliance, we've lost our media shield. Ilara's father controls half the narrative in this city. If he decides to paint you as unstable, he already has. She paused. Then you know what's coming. Kael did. Gregory Voss didn't just own media outlets. He owned perception. And if he wanted to destroy Kael's credibility, he'd do it slowly, surgically, until no one in the city trusted the Varelli name. We need a countermove, Davina said. Something that stabilizes perception. Fast. Kael looked up at her. What are you suggesting? A marriage. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kael's expression didn't change. You're joking. I'm not. Davina leaned against the edge of the desk. Ilara humiliated you because she thought you were weak. Prove her wrong. Find someone new. Someone who makes you look stronger, not weaker. Someone the board can't dismiss. And where exactly do I find this person? Davina smiled faintly. You already did. Kael frowned. What? She pulled up a file on the tablet and turned it toward him. A photograph filled the screen. A woman in her late 20s, dark skin, sharp eyes, standing in front of a bookshelf. Nira Okoye, translator, works for the Continental Banking Consortium. She was at the venue tonight covering the multilingual press briefings. Kael stared at the photo, the woman by the column. She saw the whole thing, didn't react, didn't leave, just watched. Why does that matter? Because she didn't pity you. Davina straightened. Everyone else in that room looked at you like you were finished. She looked at you like she was waiting to see what you'd do next. Kael studied the image. Nira Okoye. The name meant nothing to him, but something about the way Davina described her made him pause. You want me to marry a stranger, Kael said slowly. I want you to marry someone who isn't tied to the city's power structure, someone who doesn't owe favors to your enemies, someone smart enough to see what you're building and pragmatic enough to play the part. And you think she'll agree to this? Davina's smile widened. I think she'll negotiate, Nkamat. Nira Okoye had been translating corporate bullshit for 6 years, and tonight had been a masterclass in it. She sat in her apartment, small, clean, stacked with books in 4 languages, and poured herself a glass of wine. The Varelli-Voss wedding disaster was already trending online. Clips of Alara's rejection were being dissected on every gossip channel and financial news outlet. The headlines ranged from sympathetic to savage. Nira didn't care about the headlines. She cared about what they meant. She'd been hired to cover the multilingual press briefings for the wedding: French, Mandarin, Portuguese. Standard work. Good pay. But she'd arrived early and seen the setup: the guest list, the seating arrangements, the carefully orchestrated optics. It was a power merger, not a love story. And when Alara Voss walked away, Nira understood immediately what was happening. Someone was being sacrificed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for a moment, then answered. Yes? Miss Okoye? A woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. My name is Davina Marsh. I work for Kael Varelli. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Nira set down her wine. Why? Because you're exactly the kind of person he needs right now. I'm a translator. You're more than that. Davina's tone shifted, just slightly. You're someone who understands power, and right now, Mr. Varelli is looking for an ally. Nira's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. What kind of ally? The kind that comes with a contract, a legal agreement, and a very clear set of terms. If you're interested, we can discuss details in person. Nira didn't answer immediately. She thought about her student loans, her one-bedroom apartment, the consulting gigs that barely kept her above water. She thought about the man in the wheelchair, sitting alone in that hall while the world walked away. She thought about the way he'd looked at her, just for a second, like he'd seen something. Where? Nira asked. The Varelli estate, 10 a.m. I'll be there. Davina hung up. Nira sat in the silence of her apartment, staring at the phone in her hand. She didn't know what she'd just agreed to, but she knew one thing: this was going to change everything. Months. The Varelli estate looked different in daylight. Less Gothic nightmare, more fortress. Nira stepped out of the car Marcus had sent and stared up at the iron gates, the security cameras, the guards in dark suits who checked her ID twice before letting her through. Davina met her at the front entrance. She was exactly what Nira expected: sharp, controlled, dressed like she ran boardrooms for breakfast. Miss Okoye, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Nira said. What do you want? Davina smiled. Follow me. They walked through hallways lined with oil paintings and marble busts, old money trying to look older. Nira cataloged everything: the staff, the layout, the way people moved when Davina passed. This wasn't just wealth. This was infrastructure. Davina stopped outside a set of double doors. He's inside. Be direct. He doesn't have patience for anything else. She opened the door. Kael Varelli sat behind a massive desk, his wheelchair positioned so that he faced the entrance head-on. No attempt to hide it, no false modesty, just a man who'd decided that if the world was going to see him, they'd see him on his terms. Miss Okoye, he said. His voice was low, controlled. Sit. Nira sat. You want to marry me? Kael's expression didn't change. I want to offer you a contract. Same thing, isn't it? No. He leaned forward slightly. A marriage is emotional. A contract is transactional. I'm offering you the latter. Nira crossed her legs. Why me? Because you're not part of this world. You don't owe anyone here anything, and you didn't look at me like I was finished. Maybe I was just being polite. You weren't. Nira held his gaze. What's in it for me? Kael slid a folder across the desk. Security, a salary that makes your current work look like pocket change, legal protection, access to resources most people will never see, and when the contract ends, you walk away with enough to build whatever life you want. Nira opened the folder. The numbers were obscene. How long? She asked. 2 years. Maybe less, depending on how fast we stabilize things. And what do I have to do? Play the part. Attend events. Stand beside me when it matters. Make them believe you chose this. Nira closed the folder. That's it? That's it. She studied him. He didn't look broken. He looked like a man who'd been hit hard and was still standing. There was something in his eyes, something cold and sharp and unrelenting. I have conditions, Nira said. Of course you do. I'm not a decoration. I'm not arm candy. If I'm doing this, I do it my way. I speak when I want, I leave when I want, and you don't get to control me. Kael's jaw tightened. This only works if we look united. Then don't give me a reason to look otherwise. Silence. Then Kael nodded. Fine. Nira stood. When do we start? Tomorrow. We announce the engagement at a private investor meeting. After that, we move fast. She turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Kael looked up. If you lie to me, Nira said, if you try to manipulate me or treat me like I'm just another asset, I'll burn this entire arrangement to the ground. Understood? Kael's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Understood. Nira left. Davina was waiting in the hallway. Well? I'm in, Nira said. Good. Davina handed her another folder. Wedding's in 3 days. Nira blinked. 3 days? We don't have time to waste. Alara's already doing press interviews. If we don't move now, the narrative gets away from us. Nira took the folder and walked toward the exit, her mind spinning. 3 days. She'd just agreed to marry a man she didn't know, in a world she didn't understand for reasons that barely made sense. But as she stepped into the car and the estate disappeared behind her, one thought stayed with her. Kael Virelli wasn't broken. He was dangerous. And she'd just agreed to stand beside him. The wedding happened in a courthouse with 4 witnesses and no music. Nira signed her name on the marriage certificate at 11 in the morning, her hand steady, her expression unreadable. Kael signed below her, his grip on the pen tight enough that his knuckles went white. The officiant, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen stranger things, declared them married with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. You may kiss the bride. Kael looked at Nira. She looked back. Neither of them moved. The officiant cleared her throat. Or not. Congratulations. Outside the courthouse, Davina was waiting with a car and a schedule. We have 2 hours before the investor meeting. Hair and makeup are waiting at the estate. The press release goes out in 90 minutes. Nira climbed into the car without a word. Kael followed, and the door shut behind them with a heavy click. The silence inside was thick, uncomfortable. Nira stared out the window as the city rolled past. Kael stared at his hands. Regret it yet? He asked. Nira didn't look at him. Ask me in 2 years. Fair enough. The estate felt different now. It wasn't just a fortress. It was hers too, at least on paper. The staff greeted her with polite nods, their faces carefully neutral. Nira followed Davina upstairs to a room that had been prepared for her. Spacious, tasteful, cold. A stylist and makeup artist were already waiting. 45 minutes, Davina said. Make her look like she belongs. The stylist, a rail-thin woman named Cora, circled Nira like a predator, assessing prey. Good bones. Strong features. We can work with this. Nira sat down. Just make it fast. Cora worked in silence, her hands quick and precise. She pulled Nira's hair into a sleek, low bun, applied makeup that sharpened her cheekbones and darkened her eyes, and dressed her in a tailored navy suit that fit like armor. When she was done, Nira barely recognized herself in the mirror. You look like you could kill someone, Cora said. Good, Nira replied. Downstairs, Kael was waiting in the main hall. He'd changed into a charcoal suit, his wheelchair positioned at the center of the room. When Nira descended the stairs, his eyes tracked her movement, assessing. Clean up well, he said. So do you. Davina appeared with a tablet. The cars are ready. Board members are already arriving. Remember, unified front, no hesitation, no cracks. Kael nodded. Let's go. The Virelli corporate headquarters occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower downtown. The investor meeting was held in a conference room on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. 18 people were waiting when Kael and Nira arrived. Board members, senior executives, financial advisors. All of them turned when the doors opened. Kael rolled in first. Nira walked beside him, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Kael took his position at the head of the table. Nira stood to his right, one hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. The message was clear. They were a unit. An older man at the far end of the table, Gerard Laughlin, CFO, and one of the longest-serving board members, leaned back in his chair. So, The rumors are true. They're not rumors, Kyle said. Naira and I were married this morning. The room erupted. Not with congratulations. With questions. Sharp, pointed, aggressive. Who is she? What's her background? Does she have any experience in corporate governance? Is this some kind of PR stunt? Kyle didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Gentlemen, one at a time. Gerard leaned forward. Kale, with all due respect, this looks desperate. You just got publicly humiliated by Alara Voss, and now you show up with a woman none of us have ever heard of. What exactly are we supposed to think? You're supposed to think that I'm still running this company, Kale said coldly, and that my personal life is none of your concern. It is when it affects our stock price. Then stabilize it. Gerard's jaw tightened. We've been trying, but without the Voss Media Alliance, we're bleeding perception. Investors are pulling back, contracts are stalling, people think you're weak. Then prove them wrong. How? Gerard's voice rose. By marrying a stranger and pretending everything's fine? Nira spoke for the first time. He didn't marry a stranger. Every head turned toward her. She met their stares without flinching. He married someone who doesn't need his name to survive. Someone who isn't here because of family money or political favors. I'm here because I chose to be. And if that bothers you, Gerard, maybe you should ask yourself why. Silence. Gerard stared at her, his face flushed. Who the hell do you think you are? Your problem, Nira said evenly. If you keep questioning him in front of everyone, you're the one making him look weak. Not me. The room went still. Kale's lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. Anything else? Gerard sat back, his expression tight. No. Good. Kale looked around the table. This company isn't collapsing, it's restructuring, and if you can't handle that, there's the door. No one moved. The meeting continued, tense and brittle, but the challenge had been deflected. When it ended, Kyle and Nira left together, the board members watching them go in silence. In the elevator, Naira exhaled slowly. That was fun. Kale glanced at her. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. If I let them talk to you like that, this whole thing falls apart. You're not here to protect me. No, Nira said. I'm here to make sure they believe we're a team, and teams don't let each other get torn apart in public. The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the lobby, and Davina was waiting with her phone pressed to her ear. She hung up and turned to them, her expression grim. Alara just went live on the Voss network, she said. You need to see this. She pulled up a video on her tablet. Alara Voss sat in a pristine studio, dressed in soft pastels, her expression perfectly composed. The interviewer, a polished woman in her 40s, leaned forward with practiced sympathy. Alara, thank you for being here. I know this has been a difficult time. Alara nodded, her eyes glistening just enough to look genuine. It has, but I think it's important to speak the truth. And what is the truth? Alara took a breath. Kyle Varelli is not the man I thought he was. After his accident, he changed. He became unstable, volatile. I tried to support him, but he refused help. He refused therapy. He isolated himself and made decisions that put the people around him at risk. The interviewer's expression sharpened. Are you saying he's dangerous? I'm saying he's not fit to lead, and I think the people who work for him deserve to know that. The video cut to a montage, photos of Kyle before the accident, confident and powerful, contrasted with images of him in the wheelchair, looking smaller, diminished. The narrative was clear. He was broken, and she had been the victim. Nira watched the screen, her jaw tight. She's lying. Of course she is, Davina said. But it doesn't matter. People will believe her. Kale's expression was unreadable. How bad is it? Stock dropped 3% in the last hour. Social media is exploding. Half the comments are calling you unstable. The other half are calling her a hero for walking away. Nira looked at Kyle. We need to respond. No, Kyle said. We don't. Kyle, if we respond, we look defensive. If we look defensive, we look guilty. He turned his wheelchair toward the exit. We do what we planned. We show up. We dominate. And we let them see that she's wrong. Davina hesitated. There's a gala in 3 days. High-profile donors, media, political elites. If you're going to make a statement, that's the place. Kael nodded. Then that's where we do it. Dot. The next 72 hours were a blur. Nira moved into the estate fully, her belongings packed into 3 suitcases and a carry-on bag. The staff gave her a wide berth, unsure how to treat her. She wasn't a guest, she wasn't quite family. She was something new, and new things in the Virelli world were dangerous. Davina briefed her on the gala, who would be there, who mattered, who to avoid. Stick to Kael. Don't let anyone pull you aside. If someone asks about Alara, smile and change the subject. If they push, let Kael handle it. I'm not a child, Nira said. I know, but you're also not used to this world. These people will smile at you and gut you in the same breath. Nira didn't argue. She spent the next 2 days studying faces, memorizing names, learning the terrain. She also spent time with Kael, not by choice, but by necessity. They needed to look comfortable together, and comfort required practice. They ate dinner together in the estate's formal dining room, a ridiculous space with a table that could seat 20. Kael sat at one end, Nira sat at the other. This is stupid, she said. Agreed. She moved to the seat beside him. Better. They ate in silence for a while. Then Kael spoke. You didn't have to defend me in that meeting. I know. So why did you? Nira set down her fork. Because Gerard was testing you. And if I didn't step in, he would have kept pushing until you snapped. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was smart. Kael studied her. You're colder than I expected. You're exactly as cold as I expected. His lips twitched. Fair. They finished the meal in silence, but it felt different, less hostile, more like 2 people circling each other trying to figure out the rules. That night, Nira lay awake in her room staring at the ceiling. The bed was too big. The room was too quiet. She thought about the courthouse, the contract, the numbers in the folder. She thought about Alara's interview and the way the world had turned on Kael with barely a second thought. She thought about the way he'd looked at Gerard, cold, controlled, unbreakable, dangerous. Her phone buzzed. A text from Davina. Gala dress delivered. Fitting tomorrow at 9, don't be late. Nira set the phone down and closed her eyes. The gala was held at the Belcourt Estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city that had been converted into an event space for the ultra-wealthy. The guest list was a who's who of power: politicians, corporate moguls, media executives, old money dynasties. Everyone who mattered was there, including Alara Voss. Nira saw her the moment they entered the ballroom. She was standing near the center of the room, surrounded by a small crowd, her laughter bright and effortless. She wore a champagne-colored gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her hair styled in soft waves. She looked radiant, untouchable. Kael didn't look at her. Nira did. She's here, Nira said quietly. I know. You're not going to say anything. No. They moved through the room slowly, Kael's wheelchair cutting a path through the crowd. People parted for them, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Nira kept her hand on the back of his chair, her posture straight, her face calm. They stopped near a group of investors. Introductions were made. Hands were shaken. Nira smiled when she was supposed to and stayed silent when she wasn't. She watched the room, cataloging everything. Who spoke to Kael, who avoided him, who watched from a distance. And then Alara approached. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who owned the room, her smile warm and perfectly calibrated. She stopped in front of Kael, her eyes bright with false sympathy. Kael, she said softly. It's good to see you. Kael's expression didn't change. Alara. Her gaze shifted to Nira. And you must be the new wife. Nira, isn't it? It is. Alara's smile widened. How lovely. I hope you know what you're getting into. Nira's voice stayed level. I do. Do you? Alara tilted her head. Because Kael has a way of making people think they're more important than they are. I learned that the hard way. Kael's jaw tightened. Alara. I'm just trying to help, Alara said, her tone dripping with concern. I'd hate to see her get hurt the way I did. Nira stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her voice dropped, just loud enough for Alara to hear. The difference between you and me is that I don't need him to make me important. I was already important. You were just decoration. Ilara's smile faltered. Nira turned back to Kael. We should move. There are people here who actually matter. She walked away, Kael following without a word. Behind them, Ilara stood frozen, her carefully constructed mask cracking just slightly. They didn't stop until they reached the far side of the room, near the windows overlooking the estate grounds. Kael exhaled slowly. That was reckless, he said. That was necessary. She's going to retaliate. Let her. Kael looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. Good. The rest of the evening passed in a carefully choreographed performance. Kael and Nira moved through the room together, presenting themselves as unshakable. People watched, people whispered, but no one challenged them directly. Until the explosion started. The first blast came from the east wing, a deep, bone-rattling boom that shook the chandeliers and sent champagne glasses crashing to the floor. Screams erupted, the lights flickered, smoke began to pour through the doorways. Nira's heart slammed against her ribs. What the hell? The second explosion hit closer, shattering the windows. Glass rained down in glittering shards. People ran, shoving past each other in blind panic. Security shouted orders, but no one was listening. Kael grabbed Nira's wrist. We need to move, now. She looked around, her mind racing. The main exit was clogged with bodies. The side doors were blocked by debris. Smoke was filling the room, thick and choking. There, Nira pointed to a service corridor near the back. Go. Kael pushed his wheelchair forward, but the wheels caught on broken glass. He cursed, trying to maneuver around it. Nira dropped to her knees, shoving debris out of the way. Leave it, Kael said. Just go. Shut up. She cleared the path and pushed him forward, her hands gripping the wheelchair handles. They reached the corridor just as the third explosion hit, closer than the others. The wall beside them buckled, and Nira threw herself over Kael instinctively, shielding him as chunks of plaster rained down. When the dust settled, she pulled back, coughing. You okay? Kael stared at her, his breathing ragged. Yeah. Then move. They navigated the corridor, the smoke so thick now that Nira could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her eyes burned, her lungs screamed. Behind them, she could hear shouting, crying, the wail of sirens in the distance. They burst out into the back courtyard, gasping for air. Emergency vehicles were already arriving, lights flashing, paramedics rushing toward the building. Nira's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the grass, her chest heaving. Kael wheeled himself beside her. Nira, I'm fine. She wasn't. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing. She could still feel the heat of the explosion, the weight of the debris, the certainty that they were going to die. Kael reached out and gripped her shoulder. Hey, look at me. She did. You didn't leave, he said quietly. Nira's throat tightened. Of course I didn't. You could have. No, she said. I couldn't. Something passed between them in that moment, something raw and unspoken. The contract didn't matter. The performance didn't matter. In that corridor with death breathing down their necks, Nira had made a choice. She'd chosen him, and Kael knew it. Davina appeared, her face pale, her suit covered in dust. Are you hurt? No, Kael said. Good, because we have a bigger problem. She held up her phone. The explosions weren't random, they were targeted. Someone tried to kill you. Nira's blood went cold. Who? Davina's expression was grim. We don't know yet. But whoever it was, they had inside access. Someone at this gala knew you'd be here. Someone wanted you dead. Kael's face hardened. Find out who. I will. But Kael... Davina hesitated. This changes everything. If someone's willing to blow up a building to get to you, they're not going to stop. You need to assume everyone's a threat. Kael looked at Nira. She looked back. Then we find them first, Nira said. Davina nodded. I'll start digging, but in the meantime you need to get out of here. The media's already circling. They left through a side exit, flanked by security. As they climbed into the car, Nira glanced back at the estate. Smoke billowed from the shattered windows, flames licking at the edges. People were being carried out on stretchers. Chaos reigned. And somewhere in that chaos, someone was watching. Someone who wanted Kael Varelli dead. The car pulled away, and Nira leaned back against the seat, her mind spinning. The contract was over. This was war. Back at the estate, Naira stood in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. Her dress was torn. Her makeup was smudged. There was a cut on her cheek she didn't remember getting. She washed her face, her hands still trembling. When she came out, Kyle was waiting in the hallway. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." Neither of them moved. "Thank you," Kale said quietly, "for not leaving." Nira's chest tightened. Don't. Don't what? Don't make this into something it's not." Kale wheeled closer. "What is it then?" Nira met his eyes. "Survival." He held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. Survival. But they both knew it was a lie. Something had shifted tonight, something that couldn't be undone. And as Nira walked back to her room, one thought echoed in her mind. She wasn't just playing a part anymore. She was in this, all the way in, and there was no way out. The sun hadn't risen yet when Nira found Kyle in his study. He was hunched over his desk, surrounded by files and photographs spread across the dark wood like entrails. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. He didn't look up when she entered. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you." Nira closed the door behind her and crossed the room. The photographs were surveillance images, guests from the gala, timestamps, security logs. Kyle had been working all night, piecing together the attack like a puzzle made of razor blades. "Davina's team pulled the footage," he said, his voice flat. 3 separate charges. Planted in the ventilation system, the east wall, and beneath the stage. Military grade. Not something you buy off the street. Naira leaned against the desk. "Who has access to that kind of equipment?" "People with money. People with connections." Kale's finger traced a circle around one of the photos. "People inside my world." The photo showed a man in a server's uniform, his face half turned toward the camera. Nira didn't recognize him. "Who is he?" "No one." Kale's voice was bitter. "A contract worker hired 3 days before the gala, paid in cash, no background check. He disappeared after the second explosion." "So someone hired him." "Obviously." Nira studied the other images. "Who knew you'd be there?" "Everyone. The gala was public knowledge." Kale leaned back in his wheelchair, rubbing his eyes. "But the timing wasn't random. They waited until we were inside, until we were visible. They wanted to make a statement. Or they wanted to make sure you couldn't escape." Kale's jaw tightened. "Yeah." The door opened. Davina entered, her face drawn, a tablet in her hand. "We have a problem." Kale looked up. "Another one?" "The media's running with a narrative. They're saying the explosions were retaliation for something you did, that you've been involved in illegal arms deals, black market logistics. They're painting you as a criminal who finally got what he deserved." Nira's stomach twisted. "That's insane." "It's effective." Davina set the tablet on the desk. "Gregory Voss is the one pushing it. He's got his network running interviews with anonymous sources, claiming you've been operating outside the law for years. He's building a case against you in the court of public opinion." Kale's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white. "He's protecting someone." "Who?" "Whoever tried to kill me." Kale's voice was cold. "Voss doesn't do anything without a reason. If he's spinning this story, it's because he knows who planted those bombs, and he's covering for them." Nira's pulse quickened. "You think Alara's involved?" "I think her father is. And if he is, she knows about it." Davina crossed her arms. "We need proof. Right now, it's just speculation." "Then find proof." "I'm trying. But Voss has lawyers, layers of shell companies, encrypted communications. If he's involved, he's buried it deep." Kale stared at the photographs. "What about the board?" "Gerard's calling an emergency meeting. He wants to discuss your fitness to lead in light of recent events." Nira's blood boiled. "He's using the attack against you?" "Of course he is." Kale's voice was sharp. "He's been waiting for an excuse to push me out. Now he has one." "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Kale nodded slowly. "Then we have 24 hours. Davina hesitated. "To do what?" "To find out who tried to kill me, and to make sure they regret it." Nira spent the next 12 hours doing something she'd never expected to do. digging through the rotting core of Kael's empire. Davina had given her access to the financial records, the shell companies, the offshore accounts that kept the Varelli machine running. Most of it was legal, barely. But buried beneath layers of legitimate business were threads of something darker, contracts with companies that didn't exist, payments to people with no names, shipments that disappeared into ports with no record. Kael's father had built the empire on more than just logistics. He'd built it on leverage, on knowing where the bodies were buried, and when he died, Kael had inherited all of it. Nira sat in the estate's library, surrounded by files, her laptop screen glowing in the dim light. Her head ached, her eyes burned, but she kept digging, because somewhere in this mess was the truth. She found it at 3 a.m. A series of payments made 6 months before Kael's accident. 50,000 here, 100,000 there, all of them routed through a shell company registered in the Caymans, all of them going to the same recipient, a logistics firm called Creston Security Solutions. Nira pulled up the firm's records. On paper, it looked legitimate. Private security, risk management, corporate protection. But when she dug deeper, she found something else. Creston Security Solutions had been contracted by the Varelli Corporation 3 years ago. They'd handled shipments, secured routes, provided armed escorts for high-value cargo, standard work. But 6 months before Kael's accident, someone had authorized a new contract, a private contract, one that didn't go through the usual channels. And the authorization signature belonged to Gerard Laughlin. Nira's heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed her phone and called Davina. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "This better be important." "It is. I found something." Davina was awake instantly. "What?" Gerard Laughlin hired a private security firm 6 months before Kael's accident. 50 payments, all of them off the books, all of them authorized by him. Silence. Then Davina's voice, sharp and cold. "Send me everything, now." Nira forwarded the files and hung up. Her hands were shaking. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Gerard had been with the Varelli family for over 20 years. He'd been Kael's father's right hand. He'd stood beside Kael through the transition, through the accident, through everything, and he'd tried to kill him. The door to the library opened. Kael wheeled himself inside, his expression tight. "Davina called me. She said you found something." Nira turned the laptop toward him. "Gerard hired the firm that likely arranged your accident." Kael stared at the screen. His face didn't move. His breathing didn't change. But something in his eyes went dark and empty. "He's been with us for 20 years, Kael said quietly. "I know. My father trusted him." "I know." Kael's hands curled into fists. "Why?" Nira didn't have an answer. She'd been asking herself the same question. Money? Power? Fear? None of it made sense. "We need to confront him," Nira said. "Not yet. Kael, if we confront him now, he'll disappear. Or worse, he'll lawyer up and bury everything." Kael's voice was ice. "We wait. We let him walk into that meeting tomorrow thinking he's won. And then we destroy him." Nira studied him. "You're not going to give him a chance to explain." "No? What if he has a reason?" Kael's eyes locked onto hers. "There's no reason good enough." The emergency board meeting started at 10 a.m. in the same conference room where Nira had first stood beside Kael. This time, the air was thicker, hostile. The board members sat in their chairs like judges waiting to deliver a sentence. Gerard sat at the far end of the table, his expression calm, his hands folded in front of him. He looked like a man who'd already won. Kael rolled into the room, Nira beside him. Davina followed, carrying a briefcase. They took their positions at the head of the table. Gerard spoke first. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know this is difficult, but given recent events, we need to address the question of leadership." Kael's expression didn't change. "Go ahead." Gerard leaned forward. "Kael, you've been under immense pressure, the accident, the public humiliation, the attack at the gala. No one blames you for struggling, but the fact is, this company needs stable leadership, and right now, you're not providing it." A board member on Gerard's left nodded. "The stocks dropped 12% in 2 weeks. Investors are pulling out. Partners are reconsidering contracts. We can't afford this kind of instability." Another voice chimed in. "We're not saying you need to step down permanently, Just take a leave. Let the company stabilize. Let someone else handle things for a while. Kyle listened in silence. His face was a mask. Gerard's voice softened, almost sympathetic. Kyle, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but it's what's best for the company, for your legacy, for everything your father built. Nira's hands tightened on the back of Kyle's chair. Kyle spoke, his voice quiet. You're right, Gerard. My father did build something, and he trusted you to protect it. Gerard nodded. I've tried, which is why it's interesting that you authorized payments to a private security firm 6 months before my accident. The room went silent. Gerard's face didn't move. I don't know what you're talking about. Kale gestured to Davina. She opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, spreading them across the table. Bank records, payment authorizations, contract signatures, all of them bearing Gerard's name. Preston Security Solutions, Kyle said. You hired them. You paid them. And 6 months later, I was in a car accident that nearly killed me. Gerard's jaw tightened. That's a coincidence. Is it? Kale leaned forward. Because Creston specializes in risk elimination, corporate espionage, targeted removals. They're not bodyguards, Gerard. They're assassins. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Eyes darted between Kyle and Gerard. Gerard stood slowly. This is absurd. You're accusing me of trying to kill you based on financial records? That's not proof. That's paranoia. Then explain the payments. I authorize security contracts for dozens of firms. It's part of my job. Not off the books, not without board approval, not routed through shell companies. Kale's voice was a blade. You tried to kill me. And when that didn't work, you tried to undermine me. You waited for me to look weak, and then you moved. Gerard's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then tell me. I don't owe you an explanation. Yes, Kyle said coldly. You do. Gerard slammed his hand on the table. Your father was a fool. The room went still. Gerard's composure shattered. His voice rose, sharp and bitter. He built this empire on promises he couldn't keep, deals he couldn't close. He made enemies, Kyle, dangerous enemies. And when he died, those enemies didn't disappear. They came after us, after the company, after everything. So you tried to kill me? I tried to save the company, Gerard's voice cracked. You were going to destroy it. You were reckless, arrogant, making moves your father never would have made. You didn't understand the risks. You didn't understand what was at stake. So yes, I made a call. I reached out to people who could fix the problem. Nira's breath caught. Kale's voice was barely above a whisper. You tried to kill me to save the company. I tried to save all of us. Gerard's eyes were wild now. Your father left us exposed. He made promises to people who don't forgive debts. And when you took over, you ignored the danger. You pushed ahead like nothing could touch you. Someone had to act. Who? What? Who did my father make promises to? Kale's voice was ice. Who are these enemies? Gerard's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't answer. Kale's expression hardened. You're not just a traitor. You're a coward. Gerard lunged across the table. He moved fast for a man in his 60s, his hands reaching for Kyle's throat. But Nira was faster. She stepped between them, her arm slamming into Gerard's chest, shoving him back. He stumbled, crashing into his chair. Security flooded the room. They grabbed Gerard, pinning his arms behind his back. He struggled, shouting, his face red with rage. You don't understand. You think you're safe? You think this ends with me? They're still out there. They're still watching, and they won't stop until... The guards dragged him out. His voice echoed down the hallway, fading into silence. The board members sat frozen, their faces pale. Kyle didn't move. He stared at the empty chair where Gerard had been sitting, his breathing slow and controlled. Davina spoke first. I'll contact the authorities. Get his assets frozen. Start building a criminal case. Kyle nodded. Do it. The board members began to leave, one by one, their expressions ranging from shock to fear. No one spoke. No one looked at Kyle. Within minutes, the room was empty except for Kyle, Nira, and Davina. Nira exhaled slowly. He said they, not he, not one person. Multiple. Kyle's jaw tightened. I know. Who did your father make deals with? I don't know. Cale's voice was strained. He kept that part of the business to himself. He said it was safer that way. Davina crossed her arms. If Gerard's telling the truth, then there's a larger conspiracy. People who wanted you dead. People who are still out there. Then we find them. How? Nira's frustration bled through. Gerard didn't give us names. He didn't give us anything. Cale turned his wheelchair toward the window, staring out at the city. He gave us enough. What do you mean? He said my father made promises. That means contracts, records, something in writing. Cale's voice hardened. My father kept files. Everything he did, every deal he made, he documented it. If there's a conspiracy, it's in those files. Nira frowned. Where are they? Cale hesitated. I don't know. He never told me. Davina stepped forward. Cale, if your father hid files that dangerous, they could be anywhere. Safety deposit boxes, offshore accounts, encrypted servers. He wouldn't trust banks. He wouldn't trust the cloud. Cale's mind was racing. He'd keep them close. Somewhere he could access them. Somewhere no one else would think to look. Nira watched him. You have an idea. Cale nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. The Varelli family mausoleum sat on the edge of the estate grounds, a stone structure surrounded by ancient trees. Cale hadn't been there since the funeral. He'd avoided it. Too many memories. Too much weight. Now in the middle of the night, he wheeled himself through the iron gates, Nira and Davina following close behind. The air was cold, the ground damp. Their breath fogged in the darkness. The mausoleum door was heavy, old iron and stone. Cale pushed it open, and they stepped inside. The space was small, lined with marble plaques bearing the names of Varelli ancestors. At the center was his father's tomb, a simple stone slab with his name and dates carved into the surface. Cale stared at it, his chest tight. Where do we start? Nira asked quietly. Cale wheeled himself closer to the tomb. My father was paranoid. He believed in layers, security within security. His fingers traced the edge of the stone. If he hid something here, it's not obvious. Davina pulled out a flashlight, scanning the walls. Nothing on the plaques. No loose stones. Nira knelt beside the tomb, running her hands along the base. Her fingers caught on something, a small indentation barely visible. She pressed it. A click echoed through the chamber. A section of the floor beside the tomb shifted, revealing a narrow compartment beneath. Inside was a lockbox. Cale's hands shook as he pulled it out. The box was old, steel, secured with a combination lock. He stared at it, his mind racing. Do you know the combination? Nira asked. Cale closed his eyes. My father's birthday. My mother's. Mine. He tried each one. None of them worked. Frustration burned through him. Come on, think. Nira placed a hand on his shoulder. What mattered to him? What did he value most? Cale's throat tightened. The company. The legacy. He stopped. The date the company was founded. He'd seen it 1,000 times, engraved on plaques, printed on documents. He entered the numbers. The lock clicked open. Inside the box were files, dozens of them, contracts, photographs, ledgers, and at the top, a handwritten note in his father's cramped script. If you're reading this, I'm already gone, and you're in more danger than you know. Cale's hands trembled as he pulled out the first file. It was a contract, signed 20 years ago, between the Varelli Corporation and a network of offshore investors. The terms were vague, buried in legal jargon, but the names at the bottom made Cale's blood run cold. Gregory Voss, Alar's father, 3 members of Cale's current board, and Gerard Laughlin. They'd all signed it. Nira leaned over his shoulder, reading. What is this? Cale's voice was hollow. A partnership. My father borrowed money to expand the company. A lot of money. And these people, he gestured to the names, they funded it in exchange for control. Control of what? Everything. Cale flipped through the pages, his horror growing. They owned shares, voting rights, decision-making power. My father gave them a stake in the empire. And if he defaulted, if he couldn't pay them back, si poiash. Davina finished the sentence. They could take it all. Cale's chest tightened. He never paid them back. Why not? Because he couldn't. The terms were impossible. He'd have had to liquidate half the company to cover it. Cale's hands shook. He built this empire on borrowed time, and when he died, the debt passed to me. Nira's voice was quiet. So they tried to kill you to claim the company. Not just claim it, control it. With me gone, they could install their own people. Gerard was supposed to take over. He was their man all along. Davina stared at the contract. How much do you owe them? Cale found the number at the bottom of the page. $2 billion. The room tilted. Nira grabbed his shoulder. Cale, I don't have it. His voice cracked. Even if I liquidated everything, I'd still be short. They own me. They've always owned me, and I didn't even know it. Silence. Then Davina spoke, her voice hard. We fight them. Cale looked up at her. How? They have contracts, legal backing. They've been planning this for 20 years. Then we burn it all down. What? Davina's eyes were fierce. You can't pay them. Fine. But you can expose them. Gregory Voss, the board members, all of them. They've been manipulating your company from the inside. If we go public with this, they lose everything. They'll bury us in lawsuits. Let them. The truth is a weapon, Cale. Use it. Nira's mind raced. She's right. If we release these files, the media will tear them apart. Voss won't be able to spin this. The board won't be able to hide. They'll be exposed. Cale stared at the contract in his hands. And what happens to the company? It survives, Nira said firmly. Because you rebuild it, on your terms, without them. Cale's jaw tightened. He looked at the files, at the names of the people who'd betrayed him, who'd tried to kill him, who'd stolen his legacy before he even knew he had one. Then he looked at Nira. Do it, he said. They worked through the night. Davina contacted journalists, real ones, not the ones on Voss's payroll. She handed them copies of the contracts, the ledgers, the evidence of conspiracy. By dawn, the story was everywhere. Varelli empire built on secret partnership board members implicated in corporate coup. Gregory Voss, accused of financial manipulation. The fallout was immediate. Voss's network tried to suppress the story, but it was too late. Other outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Investors demanded answers. The board members named in the contracts resigned within hours, their reputations shattered. And Gregory Voss, untouchable media mogul, found himself under criminal investigation. Cale watched it unfold from his study, his expression unreadable. Nira sat beside him, exhausted but steady. You did it. We did it, Cale corrected. She smiled faintly. Yeah, we did. But the victory felt hollow, because even as the conspiracy crumbled, Cale knew the truth. He'd exposed his enemies, but he hadn't destroyed them. And somewhere out there, they were regrouping, waiting, watching. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. 3 days later, Nira was in the estate library when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? A woman's voice. Smooth, cold, familiar. Naira Okoye. We need to talk. Nira's blood went cold. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're worth and what you're about to lose. The line went dead. Nira stared at the phone, her heart pounding. Then she heard the crash. It came from the main hall, glass shattering, shouts, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. She ran. When she reached the hall, she found Cale on the ground, his wheelchair overturned, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Marcus was beside him, unconscious. And standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 4 armed men, was a woman Nira had never seen before. Tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in black. She smiled. Hello, Nira. I believe we have something to discuss. One of the men raised a syringe. Naira's world narrowed to a single point, and then everything went dark. Naira's first thought when she woke up was that her head was splitting open. The second was that her hands were tied. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent light, her vision swimming. She was sitting in a metal chair, zip ties cutting into her wrists, her ankles bound to the chair legs. The room was small, concrete walls, no windows. A single door. Industrial, cold. Across from her sat the woman in black. She was leaning against a metal table, arms crossed, watching Naira with the patience of a predator that had already caught its prey. Up close, she looked older than Nira had first thought, mid-40s maybe, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Good," the woman said. "You're awake." Nira's throat was dry. "Where's Kyle?" "Safe, for now." "What do you want?" The woman smiled. "Direct. I like that." She pushed off the table and crossed the room slowly. "My name is Vanessa Cray. I work for the people your husband just tried to destroy." Nira's pulse spiked. "The investors." "Among others." Vanessa stopped in front of her. "You've made things very complicated, Nira. The contracts your husband released? Those were private, confidential, and now they're all over the news." "Good." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You don't understand what you've done. Those contracts weren't just financial agreements. They were protection. A balance of power that's kept this city running for 20 years, and you just blew it apart." "You mean you've been controlling everything from the shadows?" Control is such an ugly word. Vanessa tilted her head. "We prefer guidance." Kael's father understood that. He played the game. He knew when to push and when to step back. But Kael? She laughed softly. "Kael doesn't know how to lose." "Neither do I." Vanessa's expression hardened. "Then you're both going to die." The door opened. 2 men entered, the same ones from the estate. They grabbed Naira's chair and dragged it across the room, the metal legs screeching against concrete. They positioned her in front of a laptop on the table. The screen showed a live feed. Kael. He was in another room, similar to this one. His wheelchair was gone. He was on the floor, propped against the wall, blood still streaking down the side of his face. His hands were zip-tied in front of him. He looked dazed, but conscious. Nira's chest tightened. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing yet." Vanessa leaned down, her face close to Nira's. "But that depends on you." "What do you want?" "A statement, on camera. You're going to say that the documents Kael released were fabricated, that he's mentally unstable, that you were coerced into helping him." Vanessa gestured to the laptop. "You're going to destroy his credibility, and if you don't, I'm going to put a bullet in his head and make you watch." Nira's breath came fast and shallow. "You're insane." "I'm practical." Vanessa straightened. Kael exposed people who don't like being exposed. Now they want their reputations back, and you're going to give it to them. "Go to hell." Vanessa sighed. She pulled a phone from her pocket and made a call. "Do it." On the screen, one of the men in Kael's room stepped forward and kicked him in the ribs. Kael doubled over, gasping. Nira lunged forward, her chair tipping, but the zip ties held. "Stop!" Vanessa ended the call. The man on the screen stepped back. Kael coughed, his breathing ragged. "You have 10 seconds to decide," Vanessa said. "Then I call again. And next time, it's worse." Nira's mind raced. She looked at the laptop, at Kael's face on the screen. His eyes were half closed, his jaw tight with pain. But he was looking at the camera, looking at her. And then he shook his head, just once. A small, deliberate motion. "Don't." Nira's throat closed. 5 seconds, Vanessa said. Nira stared at Kael. He was telling her not to give in, not to break, even if it killed him, because if she broke, everything they'd done, everything they'd exposed, would be for nothing. 2 seconds. Nira's hands shook. Her vision blurred. 1. "Wait." Vanessa paused, her finger hovering over the phone. "Yes?" Nira swallowed hard. "I'll do it." Kael's face on the screen twisted with something that looked like anguish. He shook his head again, harder this time. But Nira didn't look at him. She looked at Vanessa. "I'll make the statement, but I want proof he's alive when I'm done." Vanessa smiled. "Deal." She pulled out a small camera and set it on the table, angling it toward Nira. Then she handed Nira a script, printed, ready to go. "Read it," Vanessa said, word for word. Nira took the paper. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The words swam in front of her eyes. "I, Nira Okoye, was coerced by Kael Varelli into participating in a fraudulent scheme to damage the reputations of innocent business leaders. The documents he released were fabricated. He is mentally unstable and dangerous. I fear for my safety and the safety of others. Nira's stomach turned. Vanessa pressed record. Go. Nira stared at the camera. Her mouth opened, and then she smiled. My name is Nira Okoye, she said clearly. And everything Kael Varelli released is true. Vanessa's face went white. What? The contracts are real. The conspiracy is real. And if you kill us, it won't change that. The world already knows. You can't bury this. Vanessa lunged forward and slapped her. The impact snapped Nira's head to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. Her vision blurred. Blood pooled in her mouth. You stupid! Vanessa grabbed Nira's hair, yanking her head back. Do you have any idea what you just did? Nira spat blood onto the floor. Yeah, I called your bluff. Vanessa's hand tightened. I will kill him. Then do it, but it won't change anything. Nira's voice was raw but steady. You've already lost. Vanessa stared at her, rage and disbelief warring on her face. Then she released Nira's hair and stepped back, breathing hard. Fine, she said quietly. If you want to die with him, that's your choice. She pulled a gun from her jacket and pointed it at Nira's head. Nira's heart slammed against her ribs. She closed her eyes. The gunshot was deafening, but Nira didn't feel anything. She opened her eyes. Vanessa was on the floor, blood pooling beneath her. The gun had fallen from her hand. Behind her, standing in the doorway, was Davina. She was holding a smoking pistol, her face cold and hard. Nobody touches my people, Davina said. The two men in the room moved, reaching for their weapons. Davina fired twice. Both men dropped. She crossed the room and cut Nira's zip ties with a knife. Can you stand? Nira's legs were shaking, but she forced herself up. Kael, I know. Let's go. They ran. Davina led her through a maze of corridors, industrial, concrete, the kind of place built to be forgotten. They passed storage rooms, empty offices, rusted machinery. Nira's head pounded. Her wrists were raw, but she kept moving. How did you find us? Nira gasped. Tracker in your phone. I activated it the day you moved into the estate. Davina turned a corner, gun raised. Lucky I'm paranoid. They reached another door. Davina kicked it open. Inside, Kael was still on the floor, his hands bound, his face pale. Two guards stood over him. They turned when the door burst open. Davina shot one before he could raise his weapon. The other lunged at her, and they went down in a tangle of limbs. The guard's hand closed around her throat. Nira didn't think. She grabbed the fallen guard's gun and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her over. The shot went wide, slamming into the wall. But it was enough. The guard released Davina and turned toward Nira. Davina drove her knife into his side. He collapsed. Nira dropped the gun, her hand shaking violently. Davina got to her feet, breathing hard, and moved to Kael. She cut his zip ties. Can you walk? She asked. Kael tried to stand. His legs buckled. No. Then we carry you. Davina looked at Nira. Help me. Together, they hauled Kael to his feet, draping his arms over their shoulders. He was heavy, his breathing labored, but they moved. They made it to the exit, a loading dock at the back of the building. A black SUV was waiting, engine running. Marcus was in the driver's seat, his face bruised but determined. Get in, he shouted. They piled into the vehicle. Marcus slammed the gas, and the SUV lurched forward, tires screeching. Behind them, shouts erupted. Gunfire cracked through the air. The rear window shattered. Nira ducked, pulling Kael down with her. Davina leaned out the window and returned fire, her shots precise and controlled. Drive faster, Davina yelled. Marcus yanked the wheel, skidding around a corner. The SUV fishtailed, then straightened, more gunfire. The side mirror exploded. They raced through the industrial district, weaving between warehouses and empty lots. The pursuing vehicles, two of them, stayed close, relentless. Davina reloaded. We're not going to lose them. Then we stop them, Kael said through gritted teeth. How? Kael looked at Marcus. The bridge. The old rail bridge on the east side. Marcus's eyes widened. Kael, that's... Do it. Marcus cursed but turned the wheel. They sped toward the waterfront, the city blurring past. The old rail bridge loomed ahead, a massive iron structure that hadn't been used in decades. Half of it was collapsed, the rest rusted and unstable. You're insane, Davina said. Probably. Kael's grip tightened on the seat. But they won't follow us across. We might not make it across. Then we die trying. Marcus hit the bridge at full speed. The SUV bounced over cracked asphalt and warped metal. The structure groaned, bolts popping, steel screeching. Naira held her breath, her heart in her throat. Behind them, the first pursuing vehicle hesitated at the entrance. Then it accelerated, following them onto the bridge. The second vehicle stopped. Smart. The bridge shuddered beneath them. A section of railing gave way, tumbling into the water below. The SUV swerved, Marcus's knuckles white on the wheel. They were halfway across when the pursuing vehicle hit a weak section. The metal collapsed. The vehicle plunged through, flipping end over end before crashing into the river. The impact sent a shockwave through the bridge. More sections gave way. "Go, go, go!" Davina screamed. Marcus floored it. The SUV flew off the bridge just as the entire center section collapsed behind them, a cascade of iron and concrete crashing into the water. They landed hard on the opposite bank, the SUV skidding to a stop. Silence. Then Marcus started laughing, a wild, breathless sound. "We're alive. We're actually alive." Naira slumped against the seat, shaking. Kale's head fell back, his eyes closed. Davina holstered her gun. "That was the stupidest thing you've ever done." "It worked," Kale said weakly. "Barely." They drove to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a nondescript building Davina had kept off the books. Inside, a doctor was waiting, a man in his 60s who asked no questions and worked quickly. He stitched Kael's head wound, checked his ribs, gave him painkillers. Then he examined Naira's wrists, her bruised face, the cut on her lip. "You're lucky," the doctor said. "Both of you." Naira didn't feel lucky. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, like she'd been running for days and still hadn't stopped. When the doctor left, Davina stood by the window, keeping watch. Kael sat on the couch, his head in his hands. Naira sat beside him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Kael said quietly, "You shouldn't have done that." Naira looked at him. "Done what?" "Refused to read the statement. They would have killed you. They would have killed you anyway." "Maybe, but you didn't know that." Naira's throat tightened. "You told me not to. And you listened." "Of course I did." She turned toward him, her voice fierce. "You think I was going to let them win? You think I was going to destroy everything we'd built just to save my own skin?" Kael's jaw tightened. "I would have understood." "Well, I wouldn't have." Naira's eyes burned. "I'm not Alara. I don't walk away when things get hard. I don't abandon people. She stopped. Kael looked at her. "People you what?" Naira's breath caught. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Kael reached out and took her hand. His grip was steady despite the tremor in his fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not leaving." Naira squeezed his hand. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." "I know." Davina turned from the window. "We have a problem." Kael looked up. "What now?" Vanessa Cray wasn't working alone. She was just the enforcer. The people who hired her, the investors, they're still out there, and now they know we're a threat. "So what do we do?" Davina's expression was grim. "We go after them, all of them, before they come after us again." Kael's eyes hardened. "How? We have the contracts, we have the names. We use them." Davina pulled up a file on her phone. "Gregory Voss is already under investigation. 2 of the board members resigned, but there are others, bigger players, people who've stayed in the shadows." "Who?" Davina showed him the screen, a photograph of a man in his 70s, silver-haired, distinguished. "Daniel Armitage, former senator, now a private equity magnate. He's the one who brokered the original deal with your father. He's the head of the snake." Kael stared at the photo. "Where is he?" "His estate, 20 miles north, private security, gates, the works. We can't get in." "No," Davina said. "But we can make him come to us." Naira frowned. "How?" Davina smiled coldly. "We offer him something he can't refuse." Wag. The message went out at dawn. A single email sent from an encrypted account addressed to Daniel Armitage. "I have proof of your involvement in the Varelli conspiracy. Meet me at the Harlow Pier midnight. Come alone, or I release everything to the press." It was unsigned, but Armitage would know who sent it. Davina monitored his response. It came within an hour. I'll be there. Kale sat in the safe house, staring at the laptop screen. He's going to bring an army. Probably, Davina said. But we'll be ready. Neera crossed her arms. This is a trap, for him and for us. That's the idea. Kale looked at her. You don't have to be there. Neera's eyes flashed. Don't start. Neera, I said don't. She stepped closer. I'm not sitting this out. I'm not hiding while you walk into danger. We're in this together. Remember? Kyle held her gaze. Then he nodded. Together. Harlow Pier was an abandoned shipping dock on the northern edge of the city, a graveyard of rusted cranes and rotting wood. The water was black and still, reflecting the faint glow of the city skyline in the distance. Kyle arrived first, Marcus pushing his wheelchair to the center of the pier. The wood creaked beneath them, unstable and treacherous. Neera stood beside him, her hands shoved into her jacket pockets, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Davina was hidden in the shadows with 3 hired security personnel, ex-military, people she trusted. They had rifles, night vision scopes, clear sight lines. Kale checked his watch. 11:58. At midnight, headlights cut through the darkness. 3 black SUVs rolled onto the pier, their engines rumbling. They stopped 20 feet away. Doors opened. Armed men stepped out, 8 of them, all carrying automatic weapons. And then Daniel Armitage emerged. He was exactly as his photo suggested, older, refined, with the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of untouchable power. He walked slowly, his hands in his coat pockets, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He stopped 10 feet from Kyle. Mr. Varelli, he said smoothly, you've caused quite a bit of trouble. Kale's voice was cold. You tried to kill me. I tried to protect an investment. There's a difference. Not to me. Armitage smiled faintly. Your father understood the game. He knew when to fight and when to fold. You, on the other hand, seem determined to burn everything down. I'm determined to survive. Survival requires compromise. Armitage gestured around them. Look at this place. Rotting, forgotten. That's what happens when you refuse to adapt. Your father adapted. He played along, and he thrived. He died in debt to people like you. He died because he overextended. That's not my fault. Kale's jaw tightened. You orchestrated my accident. I authorized a course correction. Gerard was supposed to take over smoothly. You weren't supposed to survive. But I did. Yes. Armitage's smile faded. And now you're a problem. Neera stepped forward. You're not going to kill him. Armitage looked at her, his expression almost amused. And who's going to stop me? You? The world. Neera pulled a phone from her pocket. Everything you just said was recorded, and it's already uploaded to 3 separate servers. If we don't walk away from this pier alive, it gets released, automatically. Armitage's face darkened. You're bluffing. Try me. Silence. Then Armitage laughed, a low, bitter sound. You think this changes anything? You think exposing me will stop the others? There are a dozen people ready to step into my place. The system doesn't need me. It just needs someone willing to run it. Then we'll expose them too, Kale said, one by one, until there's no one left. Armitage's eyes narrowed. You're going to war with people you can't beat. I've beaten you. Not yet. Armitage nodded to his men. They raised their weapons. Davina's voice crackled through Kyle's earpiece. On my mark. Kale didn't move. Neither did Neera. 3, Davina whispered. The bodyguard stepped closer. 2. Neera's hand found Kyle's. 1. Gunfire erupted. Davina's team fired from the shadows, precise and devastating. 3 of Armitage's men dropped instantly. The others scattered, returning fire. Bullets tore through the night, splintering wood, ricocheting off metal. Marcus grabbed Kyle's wheelchair and pulled him back. Neera ran beside them, staying low. Behind them, Armitage dove for cover behind one of the SUVs. The firefight was brutal and short. Davina's team had the high ground, the element of surprise. Within 90 seconds, 6 of Armitage's men were down. The other 2 surrendered, dropping their weapons. Armitage stood slowly, his hands raised. Davina emerged from the shadows, rifle trained on him. Don't move. Armitage's face was pale but composed. This is over. For you, Kale said. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Davina had tipped them off 30 minutes ago. Anonymous call, shots fired, armed suspects. They'd arrived just in time to find Armitage surrounded by bodies and weapons. They'll never convict me, Armitage said. I have lawyers, judges, politicians. Maybe, Kale said, but you'll spend the rest of your life fighting them, and every second of it, the world will know exactly who you are. The first police car screamed onto the pier, lights blazing. Davina lowered her rifle and melted back into the shadows. Kyle, Nira, and Marcus moved toward their vehicle, leaving Armitage standing alone in the glare of the headlights. As they drove away, Nira looked back. Armitage was on his knees, hands behind his head, surrounded by officers. The king had fallen. Mike. They didn't go back to the estate. Too many memories, too much blood. Instead, they went to a penthouse Davina had secured. Neutral ground, high security, clean. Kyle sat by the window, staring out at the city. Nira stood beside him. It's not over, she said quietly. I know. There will be others. I know. Nira looked at him. Are you ready for that? Kale turned to her. His face was bruised, exhausted, but his eyes were clear. With you? He said. Yeah, I am. Nira's breath hitched. Kale reached out and pulled her closer. She didn't resist. She let him draw her in until they were face to face, inches apart. This wasn't supposed to be real, Kale said quietly. I know. But it is. Nira's heart slammed against her ribs. Yeah, it is. Kale kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was raw and desperate and full of everything they'd survived together. Nira's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. He gripped her waist like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. I'm not letting you go, Kyle said. Nira's eyes burned. Good, because I'm not leaving. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, the city glowing beneath them. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, they weren't fighting it alone. They were fighting it together. And that made all the difference. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Nira sat in the courtroom every single day, watching as Daniel Armitage's empire was dissected piece by piece. The prosecution presented the contracts, the recordings, the financial trails that connected him to Gerard Laughlin, to the conspiracy, to the attack at the gala. Expert witnesses testified. Forensic accountants laid bare decades of manipulation. Armitage's lawyers fought hard. They challenged every document, every witness, every piece of evidence. They painted Kyle as unstable, vengeful, a man desperate to blame others for his own failures. They portrayed Nira as a gold digger who'd married into wealth and was now trying to consolidate power. The media circus was relentless. Camera crews camped outside the courthouse. Talking heads dissected every moment. Social media exploded with opinions, conspiracies, hot takes, but the evidence was overwhelming. And on a cold Tuesday morning in late autumn, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Armitage's face didn't change when the verdict was read. He stood there, silver-haired and dignified, as if this were happening to someone else. But when the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, Nira saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones were shoved in Kyle's face. Questions came from every direction. Mr. Virelli, how does it feel to see justice served? Do you think this will restore your company's reputation? Are you worried about retaliation from Armitage's associates? Kyle didn't answer. He just wheeled himself through the crowd, Nira walking beside him, Marcus clearing a path. They climbed into the waiting car and drove away in silence. Back at the penthouse, Kyle stared out the window for a long time. Nira sat on the couch, exhausted. The trial had drained something from both of them, something that sleep couldn't fix. It's over, Nira said quietly. Kyle didn't turn around. Is it? Armitage is in prison. Gerard's awaiting sentencing. The other board members resigned. Gregory Voss is under investigation. What more do you want? I want my father's debt erased. Nira's chest tightened. Kyle, the contracts are still valid. Armitage might be gone, but the terms don't disappear just because he's in prison. Someone else will step in. Someone else will collect. Then we fight them too. Kyle finally turned to face her. His eyes were hollow. For how long? How many more battles do we fight before we admit we can't win? Nira stood and crossed the room. You're not giving up, not after everything. I'm being realistic. You're being afraid. Kale's jaw tightened. You're damn right I'm afraid. I'm afraid that no matter what I do, this company will always be built on my father's mistakes. That I'll spend the rest of my life trying to dig out from under a debt I didn't create. He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. That I'll lose you in the process. Nira's breath caught. Kale looked away. The contract we signed? 2 years. We're 8 months in. You could walk away right now and no one would blame you. You've done more than anyone could have asked. You don't owe me anything. Nira stepped closer. Is that what you want? No. His voice was raw. But it's what you deserve. Nira reached out and gripped his face, forcing him to look at her. Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect. I'm here because I choose to be. Not because of a contract, not because of money, because of you. Kale's eyes searched hers. Why? Because you're not broken. Nira's voice trembled. You're scarred. You're exhausted. You've been beaten down and betrayed and nearly killed. But you're still here. You're still fighting, and I don't know how to walk away from that. Kale's hand came up to cover hers. I don't know how to let you stay. Then learn. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd been thrown together by necessity and bound together by something far more dangerous than a signature on paper. Kale pulled her closer. The contract doesn't matter anymore, does it? No, Nira whispered. It doesn't. Then what do we do? Nira's lips curved into a faint smile. We rewrite it. The next morning, Davina arrived with news. She set a folder on the table, her expression unreadable. You're going to want to see this. Kale opened it. Inside were financial documents, recent ones dated within the last week. He scanned the pages, his frown deepening. What am I looking at? Armitage's assets. They're being liquidated to pay restitution to the people he defrauded. Davina pointed to a highlighted section. Including your father's estate. Kale's eyes widened. How much? Enough to cover the original debt, plus interest. Nira leaned over his shoulder, reading. Wait, this says the contracts are being voided. They are. Davina's voice was calm. The judge ruled that since Armitage secured the contracts through fraud and coercion, they're unenforceable. The debt is canceled. You're free. Kale stared at the paper in his hands. His breathing slowed. His grip tightened. I'm free, he repeated quietly. Yeah. Kale set the folder down and leaned back in his wheelchair. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, processing. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more disbelief than joy. 20 years. My father spent 20 years running from this debt, and it's just gone. Not gone, Davina corrected. Earned. You fought for this. You exposed them. You took the risk. Kale looked at Nira. We took the risk. Nira nodded. Yeah, we did. Davina cleared her throat. There's more. With Armitage's network dismantled and the board restructured, you have a choice. You can rebuild the company on your terms. No shadows, no hidden partners, clean slate. Kale's expression grew serious. Or you walk away, sell it, take the money, and start something new. Kale was silent for a long time. Then he said, I need to see something first. They drove to the Virelli corporate headquarters for the first time since the trial. The building looked the same, glass and steel, imposing and cold. But when Kyle wheeled himself through the lobby, something felt different. The staff greeted him with nods, some with genuine smiles. The tension that had hung over the place for months was gone. It felt lighter, cleaner. They took the elevator to the executive floor. Kale's office had been maintained in his absence, untouched, waiting. He wheeled himself inside and stopped in the center of the room. Nira stood by the window. What are you thinking? Kyle looked around slowly. My father built this place, not just the company, this office. He sat at that desk and made decisions that shaped everything I am. Some of them were brilliant. Some of them nearly destroyed us. And now it's yours. Is it? Kyle turned to her. Or is it just another cage? Nira crossed her arms. That depends on what you do with it. Kale stared at the desk. Then he wheeled himself behind it and opened the top drawer. Inside were files, old business cards, a photograph of his father shaking hands with some dignitary Kyle didn't recognize. He pulled out the photograph and stared at it. I spent so long trying to live up to him, Kyle said quietly, trying to prove I could run this empire the way he did. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I was never supposed to run it the way he did. Nira stepped closer. So, how do you want to run it? Kyle set the photograph down. Honestly, transparently, without the shadows. He looked up at her. But I can't do it alone. You're not alone? I mean, legally. Kale reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. I had this drawn up last week. I wasn't sure if I'd use it. Nira took the paper and unfolded it. Her eyes widened. It was a partnership agreement, transferring 50% ownership of the Virelli Corporation to Nira Okoye. Kyle, you've earned it. You saved this company as much as I did, maybe more. His voice was steady. I don't want you here as my wife on paper. I want you here as my partner, my equal, someone who has just as much stake in this as I do. Nira's hands trembled. This is insane. Probably, but it's also right. She looked at the document, then at him. If I sign this, there's no walking away. We're bound together, legally, financially, completely. I know. And if it doesn't work, then we figure it out, together. Kale's eyes didn't waver. But I'm done pretending this is just a contract. I'm done pretending you're not the reason I'm still standing. Sign it, or don't. But know that either way, I'm not letting you go. Nira's throat tightened. She stared at the paper for a long moment. Then she picked up a pen from the desk and signed her name. Kale exhaled slowly, something like relief washing over his face. Okay, Nira said. Now what? Now we rebuild. Bashimbu. The rebuilding took 6 months. Kale restructured the entire company from the ground up. He brought in outside auditors, severed ties with every partner who had connections to the old conspiracy, and implemented transparency measures that made the board nervous but kept investors confident. Nira took charge of operations. She streamlined logistics, renegotiated contracts, and built relationships with international partners who valued integrity over leverage. She was ruthless when she needed to be and diplomatic when it mattered. The staff respected her. Some feared her. Most of them trusted her. Together, they transformed the Virelli Corporation into something new. Not perfect, not bloodless, but honest. The media watched closely. Some outlets praised the changes. Others predicted failure. A few tried to dig up new scandals, but there was nothing left to find. The skeletons had been dragged into the light and buried properly. Gregory Voss's media empire crumbled under the weight of investigations and lawsuits. Alara disappeared from public view, her reputation in tatters. Gerard Laughlin was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The other conspirators either fled the country or cut deals with prosecutors. And slowly, month by month, the Virelli name stopped being associated with scandal and started being associated with resilience. But the hardest work wasn't corporate, it was personal. Nira moved out of the estate and into the penthouse permanently. They sold the Gothic mansion to a developer who turned it into luxury condos. Too many ghosts, Kyle said. Too much weight. The penthouse was modern, open, full of light. It felt like a beginning instead of an inheritance. They settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for work. Strategy meetings, calls with investors, putting out fires. Evenings were quieter. Dinners together. Conversations that weren't about business. Slow, careful steps toward something that felt less like survival and more like living. One night, Nira found Kyle on the balcony, staring out at the city. He'd been quieter than usual all day. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I've been thinking about my father. Nira leaned against the railing beside him. Yeah? He wasn't a good man. He lied. He manipulated people. He built this empire on compromises that nearly destroyed it. Kale's voice was soft. But he also believed in something. He believed that the Virelli name meant something. that it stood for strength, permanence, legacy. You still believe that? Kale was quiet for a moment. I believe in what we're building, not because of the name, but because it's ours. Because we chose it. Neera's chest tightened. You're not your father, Kale. I know, but I spent so long trying to be him that I forgot who I was. He turned to look at her. You reminded me. I didn't do anything. You refused to pity me. You refused to let me feel sorry for myself. You pushed back when I needed it and stood beside me when it mattered. His hand found hers. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. Neera's eyes burned. You did the same for me. Kyle pulled her closer. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple, raw, terrifying. Naira's breath caught. Kyle, I know this wasn't supposed to be real. I know we started this as a transaction, but somewhere along the way it stopped being that. And I need you to know that I'm not here because of a contract or a partnership agreement. I'm here because I can't imagine doing this without you. Naira's vision blurred. I love you too. Kale kissed her, slow, deep, like he was memorizing the shape of her, the taste of her, the way she fit against him. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. So what now? Neera asked. Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Neera's heart stopped. He opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Alara had worn. Just a platinum band with a single sapphire. Marry me, Kyle said. Not because of strategy, not because of perception, because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Neera stared at the ring, then at him. We're already married, she said, her voice shaking. I know, but that was a contract. This is a choice. His eyes didn't waver. Choose me, not the company, not the empire. Me. Naira's hands trembled as she took the ring. She slipped it onto her finger. Yes, she whispered. Kyle pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to tear him apart. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they felt safe. They held the second wedding 6 months later. It was small, intimate. No cameras, no press, just the people who mattered. Davina stood as Naira's witness, her expression softer than usual. Marcus stood beside Kyle, looking uncomfortable in a suit but proud nonetheless. A handful of trusted colleagues attended, no one from the old world, no ghosts. The ceremony took place on a rooftop overlooking the city, the skyline glowing in the late afternoon light. Neera wore a simple white dress, nothing elaborate, nothing performative. Kyle wore a dark suit, his wheelchair positioned beside her. The officiant was the same tired woman from the courthouse. She looked at them both and said, You two again? Kale smiled. Yeah, us again. Well, the woman said, let's make it stick this time. They exchanged vows. Not scripted, not rehearsed, just honest. Kale spoke first. I was broken when we met, not because of the wheelchair, but because I'd lost the ability to trust, to hope. You gave that back to me, not by fixing me, but by refusing to let me stay broken. I promise to stand beside you, however I can, to fight for you, to build something with you that's stronger than anything I inherited. You're not just my wife, you're my foundation. Neera's voice trembled when she spoke. I married you the first time because it was smart, because it was strategic, because I needed security. But I'm marrying you now because I can't imagine my life without you in it. You showed me what it means to fight for something bigger than survival. You showed me what loyalty looks like when it's tested. I promise to stand with you, to challenge you, to never let you settle for less than you deserve. You're not just my husband. You're my partner, my equal, my choice. The officiant smiled. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Kyle kissed her, slow, certain, like a promise he intended to keep. The small crowd applauded. Champagne was poured. Toasts were made. And as the sun set over the city they'd fought to reclaim, Kyle and Neera stood together, hands intertwined, watching the light fade into gold. A year later, the Virelli Foundation was established. It wasn't Kyle's idea. It was Neera's. We have resources, she'd said one morning over coffee. We have influence, and we have a platform. We should use it for something that matters. Kael had agreed. The foundation focused on three areas: economic opportunity for marginalized communities, accessibility infrastructure for people with disabilities, and legal aid for victims of corporate corruption. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't about headlines. It was about impact. Neera ran it with the same precision she ran the company. Kael provided oversight and funding. Together, they built something that felt less like legacy and more like redemption. They also built a life. Kael went through surgery, experimental, risky, but with a chance of restoring some mobility. The recovery was brutal. Months of physical therapy, setbacks, frustration. But Neera was there every step. And slowly, incrementally, Kael began to stand. Not for long, not without assistance, but enough. Enough to walk Neera down the aisle at their third wedding, a quiet renewal of vows on their anniversary, just the two of them, and the officiant who joked that she should start charging them a loyalty discount. Enough to stand beside her at the foundation's first gala, his hand on her waist, both of them watching as the people they'd helped told their stories. Enough to feel like he'd reclaimed something he thought he'd lost forever. Not power, not control. Himself. 2 years after the trial, Kael and Neera sat on the balcony of their penthouse. The city stretched out beneath them like a living, breathing thing. "Do you ever think about how it started?" Neera asked. Kael nodded. "All the time." "Do you regret it?" He looked at her. "Which part?" "Any of it." Kael was quiet for a moment. "I regret the pain, the danger, the people we lost along the way. But I don't regret you." Neera smiled. "Good answer. It's the truth." Kael reached for her hand. "I was drowning when we met, and you pulled me out. Not because you had to, but because you chose to." "You did the same for me," Neera said softly. "I was surviving, not living. You showed me the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights flicker on across the city as night fell. "What do you think happens next?" Neera asked. Kael smiled. "I don't know, but I'm not afraid of it anymore." "Why not?" "Because whatever comes, we'll face it together." Neera leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Together. The word felt like an anchor, a promise, a truth that had been forged in fire and tested in blood. They'd started as strangers bound by necessity. They'd become partners forged by survival, and now they were something more. Two people who'd been broken by the world and rebuilt by each other. Not perfect, not unscathed, but whole. And as the city glowed beneath them, vast and unforgiving and full of possibility, Kael Virelli and Neera Okoye sat together in the quiet. Two survivors who'd learned that the strongest empires aren't built on power or fear. They're built on trust, on loyalty, on the choice to stand beside someone even when the world tells you to walk away. Kael had been a king who lost his throne. Neera had been a stranger who became his foundation. Together, they'd built something stronger than either of them could have built alone. Not just an empire, a life. And that was worth more than any contract could ever measure. The city stretched out before them, full of noise and light and endless motion. But up here, in the quiet, they were still, and they were home. Years later, when people asked how they'd survived, Kael always gave the same answer. "We didn't survive because we were strong. We survived because we refused to be alone." And Neera would add, with a smile that still made his heart skip, "And because we learned that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building something they can never take away." They'd lost everything, and they'd gained something far more valuable, each other. And in the end, that was the only empire that mattered.